Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight, joined in studio by the one and only Matt Boyer to break down the Broncos' first depth chart. Let's go ahead and talk about it. Matt, how are you?
Great, Ryan. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And as we were talking about right before we came on, depth charts are, I don't know, they're kind of fluid. I think most coaching staffs would rather not have to put one out, but the NFL kind of mandates it. And I think it's fun for early sports talk radio and segments like these to talk about these things.
This is one of Coach Fangio's least favorite questions throughout the year. It always happens week one or at the end of training camp, and he always gets asked the question, who's running with the ones or who's going where? And he always answers the same thing. It's like, well, we have to put this out for the fans, but we run so many subsets, we run so many different types of packages that the guys coming out on the tunnel, you might not see them, some of them, until like the second or third series of the game. So it's really fluid.
It is fluid, but there are some notes on this one. And the thing I want to jump to immediately, the thing that jumped out to me right away, because most of the time with these depth charts, the first ones, they tend to cede to the veterans, right? The veterans usually get the deference there. But in this case, Lloyd Cushenberry is listed as starting center. Also, Jerry Jeudy is listed as co-starter with Tim Patrick. I don't think those things should be overlooked.
No. Let's start first with Cushenberry, right? Because everybody wanted to know at the beginning of training camp, is this his job? Like, is it going to be his? And it wasn't at the beginning because, remember, Patrick Morris, Austin Schlottman, they all had to compete, and it wasn't like they were just going to give Cushenberry those reps. Now, he came in with the pedigree, LSU center, won a national title, Joe Brady, his offensive coordinator, now in Carolina. So he had a great foundation coming in, but they made him earn it. And I thought the fact that he garnered the respect from the offensive line. There was a couple of times in training camp where there were some skirmishes between the offense and the defense, and Cushenberry was the one getting in between guys saying, like, hey, let's line up, let's get back on track. And I thought that showed a maturity that warranted a starting position.
And again, I'm glad you point that out. He earned it. They did not give him that right away. In fact, there was a good portion of training camp. I thought Austin Schlottman had been clearly the best center out there, the most consistent. Morris had a few snap issues, and eventually it seemed like he would maybe be better suited for guard. But Schlottman versus Cushenberry was a legit battle there for a little while.
And I think Schlottman did show the coaching staff some versatility because remember, when Graham Glasgow went down at the end of training camp, Schlottman comes in and fills in admirably, and we might see him in week one if Glasgow can't. I'll obviously get updated with Glasgow's status as we move on through the week, but if he can't go, Austin's probably going to be the guy, and so it's good that he did get those reps towards the end of camp.
So, and you bring up something about the fans, right? Because I think the fans would have had a weird thought if Jerry Jeudy wasn't listed as a starter, but the coaching staff would have been in the right to say he's not a starter as well. They could have put him backing up Tim Patrick, which is what we saw for the most part in training camp. Tim Patrick, Courtland Sutton were the top two guys out there, and usually you have to let the rookie work in there. He's sometimes running in the slot, sometimes he's starting. He's moving all over the place, which is something we sort of expected. Well, first of all, what do you think that means that they put Jerry Jeudy as a co-starter?
I think that means that Jeudy had a very good training camp, and I think that's what they expected him to be. I actually think this says more about Tim Patrick, though, because you think about it, in the offseason, people were kicking dirt on poor old Tim Patrick because KJ Hamler gets drafted and everybody was like, well, that's it. But Tim Patrick was adamant and saying, hey, I'm not giving up my job. Like, he's going to have to come in here and earn it. And Tim Patrick, we saw it during the offseason, came in great shape, has really, since the beginning of his Broncos career, just consistently gotten better. And remember, that's all we hear from coaching staffs, right? Just get better. Just get consistently better. And I think you think about last year, he had the injury, came back nicely. Big catches against Minnesota and Houston towards the end of the year. I thought he put himself in good position to come in this season ready to go and kind of take that next step next to Courtland Sutton. And I think they rewarded him with a starting spot on the depth chart. Now, as we mentioned,
it's fluid.
What's that worth? Who knows? But I do think that's a feather in his cap.
Okay, so I want to go back to a point that you made about how Coach Fangio looks at these things as a little bit fluid. Maybe Josie Jewell is the starter right now, but there might be games where Mark Barron actually ends up playing more snaps. Austin Calitro is also here. They could utilize him. How do you think that ultimately plays out?
I think Josie Jewell just has to get better in pass coverage if he wants to solidify that spot next to Alexander Johnson. You and I were talking before we came on the air. You can't put in Josie Jewell at second down and 6, say, and then see the running back split out and then not feel good about him going out and covering a running back in pass coverage. He's got to get better in his pass coverage. Now, 3rd and 15 right now, do you think we're going to see Josie Jewell, in pass coverage? Probably not. That's probably going to be more of a Mark Barron down. I think one of those guys has to, elevate his game to say, okay, I can be that run stopper in Barron's case, or I can be better in pass coverage in Jules' case. It's just about kind of closing that gap.
So another part of the depth chart I think a lot of us were interested to see is at cornerback, because coming into training camp, who's going to be the third corner? Well, we kind of have an answer, I think. Devontae Harris. Yeah, Devontae Harris, Michael Ojemudia seem like the next two guys in there. Could see a Sang Bassi at some point, but it seems like those are the next two guys. That's another rotation that'll be interesting to see because, again, Michael Ojemudia, a rookie who's been hurt for a good portion of camp, and Devontae Harris kind of had a little bit of a slow start to camp, but came on strong. What do you think that looks like?
I think Devontae Harris, you mentioned it, the slow start to camp wasn't what you wanted to see, but I thought last year, especially in the Browns game, that game-saving pass deflection late in the fourth quarter, I think we've seen what he can be, but for me, it's about, okay, where can Michael Ojemudia go from, being hurt to now? Can he make up the ground that he lost during training camp? Because he's got all the physical tools, looked good in spurts, but, playing DB as a rookie in the NFL is tough in a regular year, let alone in a pandemic year. So I think he's going to have to demonstrate to the coaches that he made up the ground that he lost in camp.
Well, and that's a great point you bring up, too, because with Michael Ojemudia, we didn't get a chance to really see him too much against starters. We saw him against second and third team a lot, sometimes with the ones, but it wasn't, he didn't get enough of that really that I think, against the Titans, I absolutely want to see him out there.
No, I think he's going to have to earn it on special teams. He's going to have to come in. I think Harris, if you think about those scrimmages at the stadium, what he was able to do well. Now, granted, those scrimmages weren't good at any level, I guess, right? So I think they're not a good predictor for what you're going to see because it was so situational. But I think that when he was on the field, Harris did look great, and that's what you want to see from a guy at the end of a training camp.
Thank you, Matt Boyer. Thank you, Steve Aller, for joining us. Thank you for watching Broncos Country Tonight.